a couple last points, and then I want to turn it over to Arthur. I mentioned the fact that tax rates are going up in almost every area under the Obama administration. One of the areas that they want to raise taxes is the U.S. corporate tax rate. And I'm here to tell you, folks, we have become so uncompetitive in our tax situation, this simply cannot prevail. And the point of this chart is to show you that it used to be, as early as the early 1990s, that the United States was very competitive in its tax system. We had a corporate tax rate, that's the black line across the top, that was below the international average. But what has happened over the last 20 years is that these nations have all of our competitor nations, every country from China to India to Germany, France, Spain, they have been cutting their tax rates aggressively to become more competitive. And you can see now that that has left us in a situation where today the United States has a corporate income tax rate of 40%, the rest of the world on average has a corporate tax rate of 25%. That can't continue. That it is unpatriotic to be in favor of that kind of tax system. It is leading capital out of this country. And by the way, it also goes for your states. One of the things that we talk a lot about in the book, Rich States, Poor States, is that tax rates matter. And what's happening in America is the same thing that's happening around the globe, right, Jonathan? Not only are our businesses moving to low tax countries, businesses are moving to low tax states. And that's one of the things we show over and over again in the book, is that there is a very clear, unmistakable pattern of migration. And the migration of people are leaving are productive people, leaving the 10 highest tax states like New York and like California and like New Jersey, and they're moving to the low tax states like Nevada and like Florida and so on. And I see my friend Rich Vedder in the back. Rich is, of course, the pioneer in this area. I think Rich did a study about 20 years ago showing that about, what was it, Rich, 1,000 people every day move from the high tax states to the low tax states. Laffer and I, using your model, we updated those numbers, Rich, and now it's not 1,000 people a day, it's 1,200 people a day. So the migration is actually accelerating out of those high tax states. The rest of the world is going towards a flat tax while we're raising our rates. That's not a happy picture. By the way, you can see there's countries like Jersey on here, and I was giving this presentation to an ALEC group a few months ago, and this woman was cheering, saying, "Yay, Jersey has a flat tax." That's not New Jersey, that's the country in New Jersey. Same thing with Georgia. But anyway, the point is the rest of the world's going flat. We're making our rates much higher. You can see what's happening with our dollar weakness and so on. We've been in an inflationary era. I think the reason Bush will be remembered, unfortunately, as a failure as an economic president was that he let the dollar explode. One last point, and then I will turn it over to Arthur. You know, when I first came to Washington, in the mid-1980s. I worked for Ronald Reagan in 1986 and 1987. I worked in the budget office. And at that time, something happened for the first time in American history. We introduced, and this was something we weren't very proud of in the Reagan administration, we introduced the first $1 trillion budget in 1986. And I said, we weren't proud of that at all. We were standing for limited government and so on. And I remember I went on Katie Couric's Today Show. It was the first time I ever went on national TV, and I prepared for this. I was very nervous about it. And I'm getting ready to go on the show, and the cameras come on, and Katie Couric says, "Mr. Moore, I see that Ronald Reagan is introducing the first $1 trillion budget in American history." She says, "I only have one question for you this morning. How many zeros are there in a trillion?" And folks, I just melted down. By the way, how many zeros are there in a trillion? 12, I heard somebody say it. 12 zeros. Now, I've been trying to sort of educate my kids about how much money $1 trillion is, because, you know, the saying in Washington these days is the trillion is the new billion, and it really is true. I mean, when I first came to Washington, we talked in billions. Now, have you noticed this? Now we talk in trillions. So I try to relate to my kids, how much is $1 trillion? And I told this one story to my 8-year-old because he really got it. And he's a big NBA fan. So I said, "Okay, David, who's the greatest basketball player in the world?" He said, LeBron James. I don't know if there are Ohio people here, but he thinks LeBron's greater. And so he said, "LeBron James." Well, I said, "David, LeBron James makes $40 million a year. That's a lot of money, isn't it?" And he said, "Hell yeah. $40 million is a lot of money." I said, "Okay, here's a question for you. How many seasons," I wonder if you know this one, Jonathan, how many seasons would LeBron James have to play basketball at $40 million a year to have $1 trillion? The answer, 25,000 seasons. Isn't that incredible? 25,000 seasons at $40 million to have $1 trillion. We have spent, folks, $3 trillion just in the last 9 months to deal with this economic crisis, doing all the wrong things, stimulus plans, bailouts, debt bills, all of these things. Here is the tragedy of the wrongness of what we have done. With $3 trillion, we could have completely eliminated the corporate and personal income tax for an entire year. That's amazing, isn't it? I mean, imagine we had done that instead of the bailouts of the banks, the bailouts of the insurance companies, the car companies, the $800 billion stimulus bill. Imagine if we had simply said no business and no worker in America has to pay income tax for a year. I would make the case to you, and we should have done that, right? We should have just said no tax. If we had done that today, we wouldn't have a 9.5% unemployment rate that's going to 10% in the next month. We would have more jobs than workers. And that is the real tragedy, is that we have forgotten the lesson of the Laffer curve. I hope you don't forget it in your states. I'm going to turn it over to my great, and very old friend, Arthur Laffer. Thank you very much.